Hey there, welcome to Dread Lullabies. I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. You know, they say the night is for resting, but for some, the darkness is where the real world begins. Tonight, I've put together a few true stories that are meant to be heard in the quiet. Stories that remind us that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are more real than we'd like to believe. Before we get lost in the dark, I'd love to know where you're joining me from, so feel free to drop a comment and tell me where you're listening tonight. And if you find yourself coming back for more, maybe consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps me keep these lullabies going for you. So, pull up the covers, get comfortable, and let's see what the night has in store for us. I have a few stories that didn't happen directly to me, but to people in my family. I grew up hearing these stories over the years, usually late at night, usually after someone said, "This is going to sound crazy," but even now, I don't know what I believe. I'm not someone who automatically thinks everything is paranormal, but at the same time, there are things that are very hard to explain. These stories have stuck with me because they come from people I trust, people who don't normally exaggerate or chase attention. They're just things that happened, and they've been talked about quietly ever since. The first story happened when I was still a kid. I was around 8 or 9 years old at the time. We were living in a really big house, the kind of house that already felt old the moment you walked inside. I don't know exactly how old it was, but it had that feeling, like it had been standing there for a long time and had seen many families come and go. Even as a child, I remember thinking the house felt strange. Not scary exactly, just heavy, like the air was thicker inside than it should have been. One night, my parents went out with some friends. My brothers and I were left at a babysitter's house, so none of us were home. Later that night, when my parents and their friends came back, something happened that they still talk about to this day. As they pulled into the driveway, all 4 of them saw the same thing. In one of the top windows of the house, they saw a figure standing there. It wasn't moving around or waving or doing anything dramatic. It was just there, standing and watching. All 4 of them noticed it at the same time, and all 4 of them reacted to it. They went inside immediately, thinking maybe someone had broken in. They searched the entire house, every room, every door, every window. There were no signs of forced entry, no doors unlocked, no windows open, nothing disturbed at all. They didn't find anyone. At the time, they didn't tell us. They kept it to themselves. They only told me years later, after we had already moved out of that house. When my mom finally told me, she said they didn't want to scare us while we were still living there. Honestly, I'm glad they didn't. If I had known about that while we were still in that house, I don't think I would have slept properly ever again. Even thinking back on it now makes my skin crawl, because I remember how that house felt, even without knowing that story at the time. Another story comes from my mom's younger years, long before I was born. She used to live with her best friend in a different house. This house, according to my mom, had constant strange activity. Nothing violent or aggressive, just odd. Things would move around on their own. Teddies from the bedroom would somehow end up on the stairs overnight. They would put them back in the bedroom only to find them on the stairs again the next morning. There was also this old, rusty fork. It kept appearing in the cutlery drawer. No matter how many times they threw it away in the black bin, it would come back. They were absolutely sure they were getting rid of it properly. And yet, there it was, again and again, sitting in the drawer like it had never left. Instead of being terrified, my mom and her friend just accepted it. They were convinced the house was haunted, but it didn't really bother them. They even named the ghost. They called it Leslie. It became almost normal to them, like an annoying but harmless roommate who liked to mess with their stuff. In that same house, something else happened that my mum still swears is true. This was around the time she had just met my stepdad. She brought him home to meet her friend and stay the night. The three of them were sitting on the sofa watching TV, just relaxing. My stepdad got up at some point to go to the toilet upstairs. While he was walking up the stairs, he saw a man standing there. According to him, the man wasn't threatening. He wasn't moving. He was just standing on the stairs. My stepdad didn't scream or run. From what I understand, he thought maybe he'd imagined it, or maybe it was the alcohol, because they had been drinking a bit that night. He went back downstairs and told my mum what he'd seen. He described the man in detail. The strange part is that his description perfectly matched my granddad, my mum's father, who had died a few years earlier. My stepdad had never met him. He had never seen photos of him. He had no idea what he looked like. And yet, my mum said the description was exact. The height, the build, even the way he stood. That detail is the part that always makes me pause. It's one thing to see a shadow or a shape. It's another thing to describe someone you've never seen and get it completely right. A few years later, another strange thing happened involving my stepdad. He was driving at night, heading home. On that route, he had to pass a graveyard. It was late and he had been driving for a while. As he was going up a hill near the graveyard, he saw a woman standing at the side of the road. At first, he didn't think much of it. Then, as he got closer, something felt off. He said she looked wrong somehow. He later described it as her not having a face, though I'm not sure if that's exactly how it was, or if it was just hard to see her features in the dark. It could have been tiredness, bad lighting, or his imagination filling in gaps. What really unsettled him was what happened next. As he drove past her, he checked his mirror almost immediately. She was gone, completely gone. That road doesn't have anywhere to hide. No bushes, no side paths, nothing. If she had moved, he would have seen her, but there was nothing. Another story involves my cousin when he was very young, around 3 or 4 years old. He used to wake up at night talking to someone. My aunt would go into his room and ask who he was talking to. Every time he said he was talking to his granddad, the same granddad I mentioned earlier. To adults, that might sound like a child's imagination, but what made it unsettling was how calm and consistent he was about it. He wasn't scared. He wasn't pretending. He just stated it as a fact. My little brother has also said things over the years that make people uneasy. He once claimed he saw my granddad too when he was younger. He's still fairly young now, so it's not something he's remembering from decades ago. He's the same brother who used to say that when he went to sleep at night, he became a fireman in another life and went out saving people. On its own, that sounds like a child playing pretend. But the details he gave were very specific. Too specific sometimes. Then there are the moments that really made me question things. One time we were playing I Spy in the car. My brother said, "Something beginning with A." Me and my mum tried guessing for about 5 minutes and couldn't get it. We eventually gave up. He then said, "Ambulance." There were no ambulances anywhere near us. We were driving on a normal road. Nothing unusual was happening. He then said very calmly, "There will be soon." About 3 minutes later, 2 ambulances drove past us with their lights flashing and sirens on. My brother just looked at us and said, "Told you so," like nothing strange had happened. Another time, a few weeks later, we were driving again. My brother, who was about 6 or 7 at the time, suddenly said, "Don't go on so-and-so road." My mum laughed at first. Then he said, "Don't? There is an accident." My mum and I looked at each other confused. She turned on the radio, and about 10 minutes later, the news came on telling drivers to stay off that exact road because there had been an accident. These things didn't happen once. They happened enough to make you stop laughing them off. People can call it coincidence. People can say, kids pick up on things adults don't. People can say it's imagination or luck. Maybe it is. All I know is that it's strange when it keeps happening. My family has always been a bit odd. Both of my brothers missed their due dates and were born on Friday the 13th, one in April and one in November. I was due on October 31st, but came 10 days early. Make of that what you will. My boyfriend thinks all of this is nonsense. He laughs it off and says there's always an explanation. Maybe he's right. But my mom and I talk about these stories a lot. That's why I know them so well. They've become part of our family history. Nothing truly strange has happened to me personally yet. At least nothing I can't explain away. But my mom now believes that my gran, who died just over a year ago, is around her all the time. My mom used to say she could see auras, though she hasn't really talked about that in years. I once made a documentary about paranormal investigators. One of them, who claimed he could see and speak to spirits, told me that I was being followed by a woman who had recently died. He didn't know anything about my family. When he said it, I laughed it off. But part of me still wonders. Call it whatever you want. Coincidence, imagination, something else. All I know is that these stories exist. They've been told again and again, and they've never quite let go of me. That story has stayed with me too in a way that's hard to shake. Not because it's flashy or mysterious, but because it forces you to imagine something so slow, so helpless, and so human. The idea of being trapped like that, upside down, alone, knowing exactly what's happening to your body and having no way to stop it, is deeply unsettling. He wasn't doing anything reckless in his own mind. He was doing something he loved, exploring, crawling through tight spaces underground, trusting his body, his skills, and the people around him. For people who enjoy that kind of exploration, those narrow crawl spaces aren't terrifying. They're exciting, they're puzzles, they're challenges. But to someone on the outside, the idea of squeezing into a space barely wider than your shoulders feels like a nightmare waiting to happen. The moment everything went wrong was so small. One wrong turn, one space that looked passable, but wasn't. He slid forward, head first, expecting the tunnel to open up the way it was supposed to. Instead, it narrowed. Gravity took over. His feet slipped, his body shifted, and suddenly he was wedged upside down in a space that gave him no room to turn around. At first there was probably panic, but also hope. Panic mixed with the belief that this could be fixed. People get stuck sometimes. You get pulled out. You laugh about it later. That's probably what he thought in those first moments. He wasn't alone at the cave. Others were nearby. Help would come. But being upside down changes everything. Blood rushes to your head. Your face swells. Your vision blurs. Breathing becomes harder, not because there's no air, but because your body is working against itself. Your lungs don't expand the same way. Your heart has to fight gravity non-stop. Minutes turn into hours and your body starts to hurt in ways you didn't know were possible. Your head pounds, your neck strains, your chest feels tight, your arms go numb, your legs, pinned and useless, feel distant, like they don't belong to you anymore. Rescuers arrived. They tried everything they could think of. Ropes, pulleys, careful digging, talking to him, keeping him calm, keeping him awake. That part always gets me. The fact that people were there, talking to him, holding his hand, telling him what they were doing, trying to keep his spirits up. He wasn't abandoned. He wasn't forgotten. And yet, none of it was enough. Every rescue attempt made things worse. The space was too tight. The angle was wrong. His body was too deep. Every pull risked breaking bones or causing internal injuries. The cave itself became the enemy, solid rock that couldn't be moved fast enough or safely enough to make a difference. And all the while, time kept passing. Being upside down for that long is something the human body just isn't built for. Blood pooling in the head causes swelling. Pressure builds behind the eyes. Your face becomes heavy, painful. Your tongue swells. Swallowing becomes difficult. Every breath takes effort. Your heart works harder and harder until it starts to fail. Then there are the things no one likes to talk about, but that make the situation even more horrifying. Your body doesn't stop having needs just because you're trapped. Hunger sets in. Thirst becomes unbearable. Your mouth dries out. Your lips crack. Your stomach cramps. And eventually, you have to relieve yourself. There's no dignity in that moment, no privacy, no choice. It just happens, and you're stuck there with it, unable to move, unable to escape your own body. Imagine lying there in total darkness, because at some point the lights fail or are turned off. The cave becomes silent except for your own breathing and the sound of your heartbeat in your ears. You can't see anything. You can't move. You can't even shift your weight to get comfortable. Every second feels stretched out, endless. And somewhere in all of that, the realization sets in. This might not end with rescue. That realization is what truly terrifies me. Not the physical pain alone, but the mental weight of knowing you're probably going to die there, slowly. Knowing that people are trying, that they care, that they want to save you, but that the situation has gone beyond what human effort can fix. He was there for days, not hours, days, nearly a month depending on how you count it. His body weakening little by little, his voice growing softer, his responses slower, until eventually his heart just couldn't keep going. There's something uniquely cruel about that kind of death. It's not sudden. It doesn't give you the mercy of shock or unconsciousness. It gives you time to think, time to remember your life, your family, your regrets, time to feel fear, hope, despair, and acceptance all tangled together. I think about what it must have been like when he realized he wasn't coming out. Did he think about his loved ones? Did he try to pray? Did he apologize to himself for going into that space? Or did he try to stay calm, to make peace with it as best he could? And then there's the aftermath. The fact that his body couldn't be recovered, that the cave became his tomb, that rescuers eventually had to seal the space, knowing he was still there. That always hits me hard. The idea of someone being left behind, not out of neglect, but because there was simply no other choice. It makes the story linger in your mind in a way that ghost stories and crime stories often don't. Because this wasn't evil, it wasn't violence, it wasn't malice. It was a series of small decisions and bad luck that led to an irreversible outcome. It also makes you think about human curiosity, about the drive to explore, to push boundaries, to go where others haven't gone. That same drive that leads to discovery and wonder can also lead to tragedy. And there's no clear line between the two. Every time I hear about people squeezing into impossibly small spaces underground, I feel that same knot in my stomach. I imagine the weight of the earth above them, the silence, the darkness, the knowledge that if something goes wrong, help might not be enough. That story stays with me because it forces you to confront how fragile we really are, how quickly control can disappear, how the body, something we trust every day, can become a prison when circumstances turn against it. It's terrifying not because it's dramatic, but because it's real, because it happened, and because it reminds you that sometimes the scariest endings aren't loud or violent. They're quiet, slow, and filled with too much time to think. And once you really let yourself imagine it, it's hard to ever forget. When I was a teenager, I spent a lot of time doing things I'm not proud of now. Like a lot of kids with too much free time and not enough sense, my friends and I used to hang around abandoned buildings and old houses. At the time, it felt adventurous. There was something exciting about going places we weren't supposed to be, especially places that felt forgotten by the world. Looking back, it was reckless and stupid, but when you're young, you don't really think about consequences. You just chase the thrill. One place we went to more than once was an old farmhouse sitting alone on a hill. It was completely surrounded by tall grass with no other houses nearby. You could see for a long distance in every direction, especially during the day. That's part of why we liked it. It felt isolated, like our own little world where no adults could see us or tell us what to do. The house itself was in rough shape. Windows were broken, doors hung crooked on their hinges, and parts of the roof looked like they might cave in at any moment. Still, it was standing, and to us, that was enough. One afternoon, a group of us went there with alcohol we had managed to get our hands on. We were young, around 12 or 13, and thought we were being edgy and grown up. We spread out in one of the larger rooms, laughing, talking loudly, and generally being idiots. The sunlight came through the broken windows, lighting up dust in the air. Everything felt normal for a while, just kids messing around in a place we shouldn't have been. A few hours in, when we were already a bit drunk and loud, something happened that changed the mood instantly. From the room next to us, we heard a woman screaming. Not just a shout or a cry, but full-on screaming. The kind that makes your blood run cold. It wasn't playful or exaggerated. It sounded real, panicked, terrified. The kind of scream that comes from someone who is genuinely afraid and in trouble. We all froze. Before anyone could even react, we heard a man's voice. Loud, angry, clear as day. "STFU, get the fuck back here." Then he laughed. That laugh is something I still remember. It wasn't nervous or awkward. It was cruel, like he was enjoying whatever was happening. Every single one of us went silent. You could feel the fear settle in the room. The joking stopped. The laughing stopped. No one even moved for a second. We just looked at each other wide-eyed, trying to process what we had just heard. This wasn't a haunted house story. This wasn't a weird noise or something we could laugh off. It sounded like something real and violent happening right next to us. After the screaming stopped, there was complete silence. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. That silence somehow felt worse. We waited for about a minute, maybe two. It felt much longer. Finally, two of us, the bravest, or maybe just the dumbest, decided to go and look around. I was one of them. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking, but I didn't want to look scared in front of everyone else. We stepped out of the room and slowly moved through the house. Every sound made us flinch. Floorboards creaked under our feet. Wind moved through broken windows. But there were no people, no signs of a struggle, no woman, no man, nothing. We checked every room we could safely get into. We looked outside, too. Remember, this was during the day, and the house sat on a hill with open grass all around it. Visibility wasn't an issue at all. If someone had run away, we would have seen them. If a car had been nearby, we would have noticed. There was absolutely nothing. We went back to the others and told them we couldn't find anyone. That didn't make us feel better. If anything, it made everything worse, because what we heard had felt so real, too real to just be in our heads. Eventually, we all left. No one said much on the way home. The excitement of the day was completely gone. I remember feeling uneasy for the rest of the evening, replaying the screaming and that laugh over and over in my head. We didn't talk about it much after that, but none of us forgot it. A while later, some of us went back to that farmhouse at night. This part is something I really regret now. We were kids and we made bad choices. We went back with the intention of stealing some things. I don't even remember what we thought was valuable in a place like that. Maybe it was just the thrill again, the idea of doing something forbidden. It was dark when we got there. The farmhouse looked completely different at night. During the day, it felt abandoned but harmless. At night, it felt heavy, like it was watching us. Me and one of my friends decided to check out the attic. There was a small opening and we had to lift each other up to get inside. I remember my friend boosting me first. Then I helped pull him up. The attic was pitch black. The air felt stale and thick, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. As our eyes adjusted, we started looking around. Old beams, dust, shadows everywhere. I remember feeling tense but trying to stay calm. Then I saw him. Standing there just a few feet away was an old man. He wasn't moving. He wasn't speaking. He was just standing there, staring straight at us. His eyes were wide and bulging, catching what little light there was. His face was expressionless, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. Not angry, not surprised, just watching. For a split second, my brain refused to accept what I was seeing. Then panic hit all at once. Both of us screamed. We jumped down from the attic opening as fast as we could. I don't even remember hitting the ground properly. My friend landed badly and hurt his ankle. I think it was sprained, maybe even broken. But at the time, we didn't care. Adrenaline took over completely. We ran. I have never run out of a place so fast in my life. We didn't stop until we were far away from that house, gasping for breath, hearts pounding, trying to make sense of what just happened. We never went back after that, not during the day, not at night. Never. Looking back now, I can try to explain parts of it logically. The old man was probably homeless, or a drug user, someone who had been squatting there without anyone knowing. That would explain why we never saw signs of people during the day and why he was hidden in the attic at night. But even with that explanation, there are things that still bother me. What was the screaming about? Who was the woman? Was there even a woman, or was it something else entirely? Why did it sound so real, so close, and then just vanish without a trace? And the old man? How long had he been watching us? Had he been there earlier that day when we heard the screaming? Was he involved, or was he just another lost person hiding in a forgotten place? We never went to the police. At that age, we didn't trust them, and we were doing things we knew we'd get in trouble for, so we kept it to ourselves. Maybe that was another mistake. Even now, years later, that farmhouse still creeps into my thoughts sometimes. Not because I believe it was haunted, but because of how close we might have been to something truly dangerous. Real people, real violence, real fear. When you're young, you think scary stories are about ghosts and monsters. As you get older, you realize the scariest things are often just people, hidden in places you don't expect, doing things you don't want to imagine. That day and that night taught me something. But even if it took years to fully understand it, some doors are better left unopened. Some places aren't empty just because they look abandoned. And sometimes the things you hear and see stay with you not because they were supernatural, but because they were real enough to remind you how fragile safety really is. I still regret going there. I regret not telling someone. And I regret brushing off that first warning, the screaming, as something we could just walk away from. Because whatever happened in that house, it wasn't nothing. And the fear we felt was there for a reason. When I was about 12 years old, I had an iguana living in my bedroom. His enclosure was a tall metal cage that sat against one wall, close enough to my bed that I could hear him shifting around at night. My room itself wasn't very big, but it had a high window set closer to the ceiling than most, with a wide windowsill. That windowsill was where I kept my trophies. Little gold and silver figures from school sports and competitions, lined up in a row. At night, streetlights from outside shone through the window at just the right angle that you could draw a straight line from the lights, across the trophies and down onto the top of the iguana cage. At first, it didn't mean anything to me. It was just how the room was set up. But every once in a while, I would wake up in the middle of the night. That strange half-awake state where you're not fully dreaming but not fully alert either. The room would be quiet except for the faint hum of nighttime sounds outside, and the iguana cage would be this dark shape in the corner. That's when I started noticing it. The light from the street would hit the trophies on the windowsill, and their shapes would project onto the top of the cage. But it didn't look like a normal shadow. The shape that appeared looked like a small figurine, almost three-dimensional, standing upright on the cage. And the strangest part was that it moved. I would lie there, frozen, watching as this little figure shifted its arms and hands, making slow, deliberate gestures. It felt like it was trying to communicate with me, like it had something important to say but couldn't speak. The movement wasn't jerky or random, like you'd expect from flickering light or passing car headlights. It was smooth, intentional. The closest thing I can compare it to is those holographic chess pieces in Star Wars when Chewbacca is playing against R2-D2. That same eerie, glowing presence. Solid enough to feel real but not fully there. At first, I convinced myself I was dreaming. I told myself it was just my imagination, my brain playing tricks on me in that half-asleep state. I was a kid, after all. Kids imagine things. So I never told anyone. I would just pull the blanket up tighter, squeeze my eyes shut, and wait for morning. But it kept happening, not every night, just often enough that I started to dread waking up in the dark. Sometimes I would wake up and immediately look toward the cage, my heart already racing, almost expecting to see it again. And sometimes I did. Each time the same thing. The figure would be there, moving its hands, silent and focused, like it was frustrated that I couldn't understand it. I never felt like it wanted to hurt me. It wasn't threatening. If anything, it felt sad or urgent. That somehow made it worse. Still, I kept telling myself it wasn't real. Then one weekend, 2 of my friends came over and ended up sleeping in my room. I didn't sleep in there with them that night for unrelated reasons. They stayed up late talking and eventually fell asleep in my bed, with the lights off like usual. The next morning, they looked exhausted. One of them joked that my room was creepy. I laughed it off and asked why. They exchanged a look with each other, the kind where you can tell they're deciding whether to say something or not. Finally, one of them said that during the night, they both woke up and saw something weird. They described the light coming through the window, the way the trophies cast shapes onto the iguana cage. And then they described the figure. They said it looked like a little statue standing on the cage, moving its hands like it was trying to talk. They said it didn't make any noise, but they both felt watched, uncomfortable, like something was there that wasn't supposed to be. As they talked, my stomach dropped. They weren't using vague language. They weren't guessing. They described it exactly the way I had seen it. The same movements, the same silence, the same feeling that it was trying to communicate but couldn't. I didn't tell them right away that I had been seeing it too. I just listened, barely breathing. And as they explained why they didn't want to sleep in my room again, they said it felt wrong, like the room itself was off. That was the moment everything changed for me. Up until then, I had always had the comfort of doubt. I could tell myself I was dreaming, hallucinating, or just letting my imagination run wild. But hearing 2 other people describe the same thing independently, without me ever mentioning it to them, took that comfort away. I wasn't dreaming. After that, I couldn't look at my room the same way. The trophies on the windowsill stopped feeling like harmless decorations. The iguana cage felt like a stage, and the streetlight outside became something I was constantly aware of, something I avoided looking at directly at night. I tried changing things. I moved the trophies around, I covered the window. I even repositioned the cage slightly. The figure didn't appear as often after that, but the memory of it never left. Even when it stopped happening, the fear stayed. To this day, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was some bizarre optical illusion combined with a child's brain and nighttime lighting. I don't know if it was sleep paralysis mixed with suggestion. And I don't know how two other people could see the same thing if it wasn't real. What I do know is how it felt. It felt like something was there, something aware of me, trying to reach out in the only way it could. And the moment I realized I wasn't alone in seeing it was the moment I understood that some experiences don't fit neatly into explanations. Even now, years later, I still think about it. Not every day, but often enough. And whenever I see light cast strange shadows in a dark room, or notice how objects can line up just right, I get that same cold feeling in my chest. Because for a long time, in that bedroom, something stood on top of an iguana cage and tried to speak to me, and I still don't know why. My mother told me this story when I was a kid, and no matter how many years pass, it has never left me. Even now, as an adult, I still bring it up to her from time to time, partly because it still unsettles me, and partly because it feels like one of those moments in life that changes you forever. My mom remembers every detail, as if it happened yesterday, even though more than 50 years have gone by. Both my mom and I are very strong Christians. Faith has always been a central part of our lives, not something casual or half-hearted, but something deeply rooted in how we understand the world. Because of that, this story never felt like something she told for shock value or drama. It was never exaggerated, never dressed up to sound scarier. She told it plainly, quietly, and only when the moment felt right. That somehow made it even more powerful. When my mom was a child, her own mother, my grandmother, passed away. It wasn't a long illness that gave everyone time to prepare. It was sudden enough that the grief hit hard and fast. The house felt empty in a way that went beyond physical absence. My mom described it as if the air itself had changed, like the warmth had been drained out of everything. Her father, my grandfather, was completely broken by the loss. He tried to stay strong for his daughter, but the pain was written all over him. In the days immediately after the death, nothing felt normal. Routine disappeared. Sleep came in fragments. Meals were barely touched. The house, once filled with my grandmother's presence, felt too quiet. Because of the grief and fear of being alone, my mom slept in the same bed as her dad that night. She was still young, scared, and overwhelmed by the sudden reality that her mother was gone. That night started like any other night, filled with exhaustion and sorrow. The room was dark, the kind of dark that feels heavier when you're grieving. My mom eventually drifted into sleep, but it wasn't deep or peaceful. It was restless, the kind of sleep where you're half aware of everything around you. Sometime in the middle of the night, she woke up. At first, she didn't know why. There was no loud noise, no sudden movement, just a feeling that something had changed. Then she heard it. Sounds coming from the hallway outside the bedroom. Not random sounds, not creaks or settling noises from the house. It sounded exactly like her mother's slippers dragging softly across the floor. My mom said she knew that sound better than almost anything. Her mother had a very specific way of walking at night, slow and careful, her slippers brushing the floor with each step. It was such a familiar sound that for a brief moment, her mind tried to convince her that everything was normal, that her mom was still alive, still walking down the hallway like she always did. But reality hit immediately after that thought. Her mother was gone. The sound continued, slow and deliberate, moving closer to the bedroom door. My mom's heart started pounding. She lay there frozen, listening, too scared to move, too scared to speak. Then she heard the bedroom door open slightly. just a little, enough to let in a darker shape against the darkness of the room. The room itself was pitch black. There was no moonlight, no lamp, nothing to help her see clearly. But then she felt it, a presence above her. A not touching her, not speaking, just there, heavy, overwhelming, watching. She said fear washed over her so completely that she couldn't even scream. Her body went rigid. Every instinct told her something was wrong, something she didn't understand and couldn't control. Slowly, she looked up. What she saw stayed with her for the rest of her life. She didn't see a solid person. There were no clear facial features, no clothing, no details like you'd expect from a physical body. What she saw was a shape, a human-shaped form standing over her. And inside that shape were what looked like stars, not bright like fireworks, but deep and endless like a night sky. It wasn't glowing in a way that lit the room, but it was unmistakably there. She knew instantly who it was. It was her mother. Not because the figure spoke, and not because it smiled or reached out. She just knew. In the same way you recognize someone you love without needing proof. The knowledge came from somewhere deeper than logic, but knowing it was her mother didn't take the fear away. If anything, it made it worse. My mom started shaking her dad, who was lying next to her. She whispered urgently, her voice trembling, saying over and over, "Dad, wake up! Dad, wake up!" She was desperate for him to see it too, to confirm she wasn't imagining it, to protect her from whatever was happening. Her father was awake. That was the part that unsettled her the most. He didn't sit up. He didn't turn on a light. He didn't react with shock or confusion. Calmly, almost gently, he said, "Go back to sleep, just ignore it and go back to sleep." Those words didn't comfort her. They terrified her. Well, why wasn't he reacting? Why wasn't he afraid? The presence didn't move. It didn't speak. It just remained there, silently watching. My mom said she felt completely helpless. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She prayed. She prayed over and over again, out loud, in her head. She begged God to make it go away. She asked for protection. She asked for peace. She asked for it to stop. She didn't know how long she prayed. Time felt strange, stretched, and unreal. Eventually, without warning, the presence faded. The shape dissolved into the darkness, like it had never been there at all. Exhausted and emotionally drained, my mom eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, the house felt different again, still heavy with grief, but quieter. My mom found her dad sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring into nothing. He looked older than he had the day before, like the night had taken something from him. She hesitated, then asked him about what happened. He didn't act confused. He didn't ask what she meant. All he said was, "I know, I saw her too." That was it. No long explanation, no discussion, just confirmation. In that moment, my mom understood something that would stay with her forever. Her mother had come to say goodbye, not to scare her, not to harm her, but to visit one last time. Even so, it was terrifying, not because it was evil, but because it crossed a boundary between life and death that no child is ready to face. My mom still believes with complete certainty that it was her mother, not a demon, not a trick of the mind, not a dream, a final visit, a farewell. Even now, decades later, she can describe the sound of the slippers, the way the door opened, the feeling of the presence and the star-filled shape without hesitation. Her voice changes when she talks about it, softer, more serious, like she's standing in that dark room again. As a Christian, she doesn't see it as something that contradicts her faith. She sees it as something mysterious, something allowed by God for reasons we may never fully understand. But that doesn't make it less frightening. Sacred moments can still be terrifying when they're unexpected. When she tells the story, she always says the same thing. She knows her mother came in love. But love doesn't always feel gentle when it comes wrapped in the unknown. That story shaped how my mom understands death, grief, and the unseen world. And hearing it shaped me too. It reminds me that even faith doesn't erase fear, and that some experiences stay with us not because they were bad, but because they were powerful. 50 years later, the memory is still clear, still sharp, still real, and every time she tells it, I can see that little girl in the dark, shaking her father, praying for it to stop, and realizing for the first time that death doesn't always mean goodbye. About a year ago, I was living in a small apartment building that looked normal from the outside, but always felt a little strange once you were inside. It wasn't a big place at all. There were only 12 units total, spread across 3 floors. Each floor had 4 apartments, and instead of long hallways, the building was designed with circular vestibules. You'd step into a small, round space with doors spaced around it, and a staircase in the center leading up or down. It meant you could see directly across from your own door into your neighbor's space whenever their door was open. There was very little privacy, and sound carried in odd ways. The building was usually quiet. Most people kept to themselves. You'd see the same faces coming and going, but there wasn't much interaction beyond a nod or a quick hello. Directly across from my unit lived a man I'll call my neighbor, because even now it feels strange to think of him by name. He was in his late 20s or early 30s, well-dressed, polite, and reserved. From what I understood through casual building gossip, he was a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. The rumor was that his father was extremely wealthy and well-known in legal circles, and that this guy was following in his footsteps. He had that look about him too, like someone who had always been groomed for success. Clean-cut, calm, always composed. He mostly kept to himself. I'd see him leave in the mornings in pressed clothes, carrying a briefcase, and come home late. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. Honestly, if not for the apartment layout, I probably wouldn't have noticed him much at all. But he didn't live alone. He had a girlfriend who lived with him, and she was impossible to ignore. She was noticeably younger than him. I never learned her exact age, but she looked early 20s at most. From the first time I interacted with her, something felt off. She was intense in a way that made your skin prickle. She didn't just talk to you, she interrogated you. The first time we spoke, she asked if I'd seen her boyfriend leave earlier that morning. I told her no, because I hadn't. She stared at me like she was trying to decide if I was lying. After that, she'd occasionally stop me in the vestibule or knock on my door with questions that made me uncomfortable. Had I seen him come home late? Had I noticed any other women around? Did anyone ever come over when she wasn't there? Her tone was never friendly. It was sharp, suspicious, almost accusing, even though I had done absolutely nothing to warrant it. It felt invasive, like she was trying to pull me into something I wanted no part of. Other neighbors noticed her behavior too. It became something we joked about, nervously, when she wasn't around. People would say things like, "She's going to lose it one day," or "That guy better watch out." It wasn't said lightly, but it was still framed as a joke, because no one really wants to believe something truly awful could happen right next door. Looking back now, those jokes feel heavy and wrong, like we all sensed something but didn't want to name it. Despite her behavior, nothing outwardly dramatic ever happened. There were no loud arguments spilling into the vestibule, no screaming matches in the middle of the night, no police visits. Everything stayed quiet, too quiet maybe. The kind of quiet that makes you assume things are under control, even when they aren't. Then one night, about a week before Halloween, everything changed. My brother was staying with me, and we were having one of those nights where you lean into the season. We'd ordered food, turned off most of the lights, and were watching scary movies back to back. The apartment was dim, the TV was glowing, and we were relaxed in that slightly jumpy way you get when you're watching horror films but still feel safe in your own space. At some point in the evening, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just firm. I remember pausing the movie and exchanging a confused look with my brother. We weren't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I was met by two police officers. Their presence immediately drained the room of that cozy, playful fear the movies had created. This was real. This was serious. They told us we needed to leave the building immediately. They didn't explain much at first, just that there had been an incident, and for our safety, we had to get out. My brain struggled to catch up with what they were saying. An incident where? When? As they spoke, I noticed something behind them, over one officer's shoulder. My neighbor's apartment door was wide open. Because of the circular layout of the vestibule, I had a clear view straight across. What I saw made my stomach drop. The carpet leading from his doorway was soaked in blood. Not a smear, not a splash. It was everywhere, dark and heavy, spread across the floor in a way that didn't look accidental or survivable. It looked final. I didn't need the officers to explain anything after that. My body went cold. My brother went quiet. Everything suddenly felt unreal, like I was still watching a movie, but the kind you don't want to keep watching. The officers allowed me a few minutes to grab things I might need overnight. I moved through my apartment in a daze, picking up random items without really thinking. My phone charger, a jacket, my keys. I remember my hands shaking as I shoved things into a bag. My mind kept trying to make sense of what I'd seen, but it couldn't. As we stepped out into the vestibule again, EMTs were arriving. The space filled with uniforms and equipment. Everything felt too small, too close. The air was heavy, and there was a sharp, sterile smell that didn't belong in an apartment building. Then I saw them bring out a body bag. They carried it carefully down the stairs past us. It was zipped shut, but there was no mistaking what it meant. My neighbor, the quiet lawyer, the man who kept to himself and smiled politely, was dead. Later, we learned what had happened. His girlfriend had shot him multiple times in the head. She had used his own gun. It had happened while we were sitting just across the vestibule watching horror movies, completely unaware. No screams, no gunshots that we noticed. Nothing that broke the illusion of a normal evening. The walls hadn't warned us. The silence hadn't warned us. That part still messes with me. How close we were. How easily it could have gone unnoticed until morning. How violence doesn't always announce itself the way you expect it to. In the days that followed, the building felt different. Even after the police tape was gone and the carpets were replaced, something lingered. Every time I stepped into that vestibule, I remembered the blood. Every time I heard a noise at night, my mind jumped to conclusions it never had before. I kept thinking about the girlfriend, about the questions she used to ask me, the jealousy in her voice, the way she seemed constantly on edge. I thought about the jokes we made, the warnings we brushed off. I thought about how someone can live right across from you, share the same small space, and still be completely unknowable. What haunts me the most is how ordinary it all felt until it wasn't. There was no dramatic buildup, no obvious warning signs that screamed danger. Just small moments of discomfort that were easy to ignore. A strange question, an uneasy feeling, a joke made to diffuse tension. Now, when I think about that night, it doesn't feel like a horror story in the traditional sense. There were no ghosts, no monsters, no shadows in the dark. Just people, just real life. And somehow that makes it so much worse. I still think about how we were watching scary movies trying to feel frightened in a controlled, harmless way, while something truly terrifying was happening just feet away. The contrast between those two realities is something I don't think I'll ever fully shake. It taught me that sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones we imagine on a screen. They're the ones living quietly beside us, waiting for a moment we'll never see coming. It isn't really that scary when I try to explain it, and honestly, it doesn't even feel like much of a story. Nothing dramatic happened, no one got hurt, and there was no big ending. But for some reason, it has stayed with me all these years, and the memory still feels strange and unfinished in my mind. It happened during the day, which is part of why it confused me so much. My friend and I decided to go back to our old elementary school. It wasn't a planned thing. We were just walking around, bored, talking about random stuff, and somehow we ended up near the school. The place had been closed for a while, and there was a tall fence around it. We knew we weren't supposed to be there, but it didn't feel dangerous. It felt more like curiosity and nostalgia pulling us in. We climbed over the fence pretty easily and landed inside the school grounds. Everything looked familiar, but also wrong at the same time. The playground was still there, but it was quiet. No kids running around, no teachers yelling, no noise at all. Schools are usually loud, even when you're just remembering them, but this one felt empty in a way that made my chest feel a little tight. Still, nothing felt scary yet. Just quiet. We walked around for a bit, looking at the building from the outside. The walls, the windows, the doors, all of it looked exactly the same as when we were younger, just older and more worn down. Paint was chipped, and some of the windows looked dusty. It felt like time had stopped there, like the place was frozen in the past. At some point, I wandered away from my friend and walked toward one of the main entrances. It was one of the doors we used to go through every morning before class. Of course, it was locked. I don't know why I walked up to it. Maybe it was habit. Maybe I just wanted to look inside and see the hallway one more time. That's when I saw it. There was a handprint on the glass door. At first, my brain didn't fully understand what I was looking at. It took a second to really register. Then I noticed the fingers. They were long, way too long, and extremely slim. Not just thin, but unnaturally thin, like there was no flesh on them at all. The shape reminded me of bones, like a skeletal hand pressed flat against the glass. The handprint wasn't smudged or messy. It was clear, like someone had intentionally placed their hand there. The fingers stretched out in a way that made my stomach drop. It didn't look like the handprint of a child, and it didn't feel like a normal adult hand either. Something about the proportions felt wrong. The moment I really saw it, my body reacted before my mind did. I started crying immediately. I screamed, loud and sharp, without even thinking about it. I didn't decide to scream. It just happened. My chest felt tight, my throat burned, and tears came out of nowhere. I didn't even understand why I was reacting like that. There was no movement, no sound, just that handprint. My friend ran over, shocked by my reaction. I could barely speak. I just pointed at the door. When they looked, they went quiet. That part is important to me because it means it wasn't just in my head. I didn't imagine it. My friends saw it too. They didn't scream like I did, but I could tell they were unsettled. They stared at it for a moment longer than felt comfortable. They agreed that it looked strange. The fingers were too long, too thin. It didn't look normal. After that, everything feels blurry in my memory. I know we left quickly. I know my heart kept racing even after we climbed back over the fence. I remember feeling embarrassed about crying and screaming, but also confused because I couldn't explain why I reacted that way. It felt like fear came from somewhere deeper than logic. Even now, I still think about it. I still wonder what it really was. Part of me tries to explain it away. Maybe it was just the handprint of an adult with very long, slim fingers. Maybe the glass distorted it. Maybe the lighting made it look worse than it really was. Maybe my mind filled in the gaps because of the setting, because abandoned places already make people uneasy. But another part of me can't fully let it go. The shape didn't feel right, and the fear I felt didn't feel imagined. It felt instant and overwhelming, like my body recognized something as wrong before my brain could catch up. What makes it harder to dismiss is that my friend saw it too. If it had just been me, I could tell myself it was my imagination. but it wasn't. Someone else saw the same thing and felt uneasy about it. I don't claim it was anything supernatural. I don't say it was a ghost or something paranormal. I honestly don't know what it was. That's what bothers me the most. There's no clear answer, just a strange image burned into my memory, and a reaction I still can't fully explain. It wasn't a big event. It didn't change my life, but even now, years later, I still remember the way those fingers looked against the glass. Long, thin, almost like bones, and I still remember how I cried and screamed without knowing why. Sometimes the quiet moments, the ones with no explanation, are the ones that stay with you the longest. And this is one of those moments I don't think I'll ever fully understand. When I was about 13, I had an experience that still sticks with me, even though I've never been able to fully explain it. It happened late at night while I was trying to fall asleep, in that strange in-between state where you're not fully awake anymore, but you're not completely asleep either. Your thoughts drift, images form on their own, and reality feels soft around the edges. I remember lying there, barely aware of my room, half lost in my own mind. Without trying to imagine anything on purpose, a scene just appeared. It felt more like I was watching something than creating it. I saw a knight and his wife standing together in a wide, open meadow. Everything about it felt calm and beautiful. The grass was bright, the sky felt open and warm, and there was a sense of peace to the whole scene. They were close to each other, nay, comfortable, like two people who belonged together. There was nothing threatening or strange about it at first. It felt gentle, almost comforting. Then, without warning, the entire feeling of the scene shifted. The knight and his wife suddenly turned away from each other at the exact same moment. Slowly, in perfect unison, they turned their heads toward me. Their expressions didn't change, but something about them felt wrong. They didn't blink, they didn't speak, they didn't move naturally. It was as if they were no longer part of a dream, but were aware of me watching them. The moment their eyes met mine, everything snapped. I was instantly wide awake. Not the groggy kind of waking up you usually get from a dream, but fully alert, like someone had flipped a switch in my brain. My heart was pounding and my body felt tense all over. I remember thinking very clearly that I had never felt that awake in my life. It was like my senses were turned up too high. Almost immediately, chills spread across my skin. Not just goosebumps, but a deep, crawling sensation that made my whole body feel uncomfortable. The room felt different, heavier somehow, even though nothing had changed. I lay there in the dark, afraid to move, replaying the moment over and over in my head. The image of them turning to look at me wouldn't go away. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, just my imagination doing something weird as I fell asleep. But the fear didn't fade the way it usually does after a bad dream. I stayed awake for a long time, unable to relax, constantly aware of my surroundings. When I did finally drift off again, it was restless and shallow. I kept waking up throughout the night, still feeling uneasy. That strange, cold feeling stayed with me until morning. When the sun finally came up, the fear slowly began to fade, but the memory didn't. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was different from a normal dream. It didn't feel symbolic or random. It felt intrusive, like something had noticed me. To this day, I still don't know how to explain it. I've thought about sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, stress, or my mind simply playing tricks on me. All of those explanations make sense logically, but none of them fully capture how real it felt in that moment. It wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt deeply and physically. I've never had another experience quite like it. No other dream has ever snapped me awake that way or left such a strong, lingering effect. Even now, years later, I can remember the exact feeling of those unblinking eyes turning toward me and the sudden certainty that I was no longer just dreaming. Whatever it was, it left an impression that time hasn't erased. And even though I don't believe it was anything supernatural, the memory still gives me chills when I think about it, simply because of how intensely real it felt in that moment between sleep and waking. When I think back on my childhood, there are moments that feel distant and softened by time. And then there are moments that remain sharp, vivid, and heavy, no matter how many years pass. I am 42 now, but this is one of those memories that never faded. It still finds me in my sleep, still pulls me back into that cold night whenever my mind goes quiet. I grew up in a very remote region of the Russian Federation, the kind of place where land stretches endlessly and silence feels alive. My grandparents, my Dada and Baba, had a farm far from any real town. It was isolated, surrounded by fields, dirt paths, and darkness that felt deeper than anything people in cities can imagine. When night came, there were no streetlights, no distant hum of traffic, no glow on the horizon, just wind, animals, and blackness. I was 12 years old at the time. That summer, I stayed at the farm with a close friend of mine. He was younger than me, maybe 10 or 11, but he spent more time with my family than his own. He felt like a little brother to me. We slept in the main house while my Dada and Baba lived nearby in a small bungalow not far from the farm buildings. Normally, my uncle stayed with us at night to keep an eye on things. He was supposed to watch over us after my grandparents went to sleep. That night, though, things didn't go as planned. My uncle had been drinking. That wasn't unusual, but what was unusual was that he didn't come back. Hours passed, and he never returned to the house. At first, we weren't too worried. We thought maybe he had fallen asleep somewhere, maybe passed out in the field or near one of the sheds. But as more time passed, the worry crept in. The cold night stretched on, and the silence outside felt heavier than usual. Eventually, fear replaced patience. We decided to go look for him. I remember standing at the edge of the field, the darkness in front of us so thick it felt solid. The wind cut through our clothes, and the ground was hard and uneven beneath our feet. My friend didn't want to go. He froze at the edge of the field and refused to step forward. He kept saying it was too dark, too cold, that we should go back. Looking back now, I wish I had listened to him. But I was older and I felt responsible. I told him we had to check, that my uncle might be hurt or freezing somewhere out there. Eventually, I convinced him. We walked into the field, following the narrow dirt grooves that cut through the land. These paths were familiar in daylight, but at night they felt like something else entirely. Every sound made me tense. Every shadow felt like it was moving. Still, we kept going, calling my uncle's name into the darkness, our voices sounding small and weak. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, a man jumped at my friend. It was so sudden that my brain couldn't process it at first. 1 second we were walking, the next there was movement, violence, chaos. The man grabbed my friend and started beating him. I remember the sound of my friend screaming, high and desperate. I remember being frozen, unable to move, unable to think. My body felt useless, like I had been turned into stone. The sounds are what haunt me the most. I heard his nose crunch. That sound is burned into my memory. I heard the impact, the wet, a sickening noise that no child should ever hear. My friend screamed and struggled, and somehow, through pure instinct and desperation, he managed to kick and twist free. I don't know how he did it. Adrenaline, fear, survival, whatever it was, it saved his life. The moment he broke free, we ran. We ran toward the house as fast as our legs could carry us. our lungs burning, our hearts pounding so hard I thought mine would burst. I didn't look back. I couldn't. All I knew was that we had to reach safety. Our screams carried across the farm. My Dada heard us. He came out of the bungalow with his old shotgun, still half asleep, but instantly alert. Without hesitation, he started firing into the night, warning shots meant to scare whoever was out there. The sound of the gunshots echoed across the fields, loud and terrifying, but also comforting in a strange way. It meant help had come. My friend collapsed near the house, shaking and crying. His shirt was ripped open at the front, torn badly during the attack. He was bleeding from his face, his nose clearly broken. As we tried to calm him, we noticed something else that confused us at the time. The front of the attacker's jeans had been torn as well, badly. In the freezing cold, it was obvious, disturbing, and wrong. There was blood, and it didn't look like an accident. At that moment, our minds jumped to conclusions. We thought the man was a creep, a predator. Everything about the situation felt that way. The violence, the location, the way he attacked without warning. It all pointed in one direction, at least to our young, terrified minds. The police eventually caught him. We never learned much about what happened after that. We were told he was mentally unstable, that he was crazy, and that things were not what they appeared to be. His motive, they said, wasn't what it looked like. But no one explained further, and no one thought it was appropriate to tell two traumatized children the details. Years later, I tried to find records. I searched for information, for something official that could explain who he was and why he did what he did. But there was nothing. If records existed, they were never made public, or they were lost. In those days, especially in remote areas, documentation wasn't always preserved. And if the Soviets kept records, they certainly didn't make them easy to find. What stays with me isn't just the attack itself. It's the feeling of helplessness. The moment where I stood there, watching my friend being beaten, unable to move. That guilt followed me for years. Even now, part of me wonders if I could have done something, anything to stop it sooner. My friend survived, but he was never the same. Neither was I. That night changed how I saw the world. It taught me far too early that danger doesn't always announce itself, that evil can come out of the dark without warning, that adults aren't always there to protect you, and sometimes survival depends on instinct and luck. I still hear his screams in my dreams. I still hear that sound, the crunch, the moment everything went wrong. And every time I remember that night, I think about how close we came to something much worse, how easily that field could have swallowed us both. Some memories don't belong to the past. They live with you. This one lives with me still. It is something I actually lived through, not a story I heard from someone else or read online. Even now, when I think back on it, it feels unreal, like something that should only happen in movies or nightmares. But it was my life, and the effects of it are still with me every day. I met him one night at a bar. He seemed mysterious, quiet, in a way that felt intriguing at the time. I was lonely, insecure, and not in a good place emotionally. We talked, drank, and by the end of the night, we went home together. I didn't think much of it afterward. To me, it was just a one-night stand, something that happened and would be left behind like so many other forgettable nights. But then he started appearing everywhere I went. At first, it felt like coincidence. I'd see him at places I liked, restaurants, stores, even areas where I didn't expect to run into anyone I knew. He'd smile, act casual, and talk to me like it was no big deal. I told myself it was romantic, like fate or destiny. I had very low self-esteem at the time, and a part of me felt flattered that someone seemed so interested in me. Looking back now, I can see how wrong that thinking was. What I saw as persistence was actually stalking, What I told myself was affection was control. But when you don't value yourself, you tend to accept behavior you shouldn't. I ignored the warning signs because I wanted to feel wanted. Eventually, we started a relationship. That's when everything changed. Almost immediately, he became suspicious of me. He accused me of cheating constantly, even though I never did. No matter where I went, who I talked to, or what I did, he found a reason to accuse me. I tried to reassure him, explain myself, and prove my loyalty, but nothing was ever enough. The accusations turned into emotional abuse, then physical abuse. He would hurt me and then apologize, promising it would never happen again. I wanted to believe him. I thought if I loved him enough, or if I behaved perfectly, things would get better. They never did. The abuse escalated over time. I was strangled more times than I can count. Each time I felt my sense of reality slipping away. I lived in constant fear, always watching his mood, always trying to stay quiet and invisible. I felt trapped, like there was no way out. Then I became pregnant. Instead of calming him down, it made everything worse. He became more violent, more unpredictable. It was like the pregnancy flipped a switch in him. I could feel that he didn't want me alive anymore. The fear I lived with every day became unbearable. One night, everything came to a head. I was pregnant, exhausted, and hungry. I didn't even have enough money for a cheap frozen pizza. He was in another room playing video games. I said something quietly, more to myself than to him. I said I hated my life. He paused the game and walked into the bathroom where I was. The look on his face told me immediately that this time was different. There was no argument, no yelling. He attacked me with the clear intention to kill me. I won't go into graphic detail, but he tried multiple ways to end my life and the life growing inside me. In that moment, I truly believed I was going to die. I felt my body giving up. I remember praying, not out loud, but in my mind. I begged God to help me. And then something strange happened. I felt a calm voice inside me telling me exactly what to do. It told me to stop fighting, to go still, to play dead, and it told me when to get up and run. I followed that instinct completely. When he believed I was no longer a threat, I found the strength to move. I ran. I don't even remember how I made it out, only that I did. Somehow I survived. I had him arrested. I went through the legal system. I told my story over and over again to police officers, lawyers, and judges. Reliving it each time felt like being attacked all over again. In court, I learned things about him that made my stomach turn. I found out he had thrown his ex out of a moving car in the past. I wasn't the first person he had tried to destroy. Despite everything, the punishment he received was almost nothing. 6 months' time served. 1 year of probation. That was it. When he was released, he laughed at me. That laugh still echoes in my head sometimes. It felt like the system had failed me completely. The baby didn't survive. That loss broke something inside me that I don't think will ever fully heal. I wasn't just grieving the abuse. I was grieving a life that never got a chance to exist. I carry that grief every day. Some days it's quiet, and other days it overwhelms me completely. Since then, I live with constant fear. Nighttime is the worst. I'm terrified that he will come back to finish what he started. I have paranoia that follows me everywhere. I check doors and windows obsessively. I jump at every sound. I have repeated nightmares about that night, reliving it over and over. I take medication that's supposed to block dreams. But it doesn't work. The nightmares always find a way through. What hurts even more is that after everything, my life didn't magically get better. I didn't suddenly feel strong or healed. I let myself go. I felt worthless. And because of that, I ended up in other dangerous situations. I was kidnapped and assaulted later on, but my mind barely focuses on that. Compared to what happened with him, everything else feels distant, like it happened to someone else. I'm angry at myself sometimes. Angry that I ignored the signs. Angry that I stayed. Angry that I survived but lost my baby. Angry that he's still out there, living his life, while I'm stuck trying to piece mine back together. I'm scared all the time. I don't feel safe in the world anymore. Trust feels impossible. Sleep feels dangerous. Peace feels out of reach. I try to function, to live, to move forward, but the fear and grief are always right there, just under the surface. I tell this story not because I want sympathy, but because it's my truth. Because people need to understand how easily abuse can start, how quietly it grows, and how hard it is to escape once you're trapped. And because even when you survive, the fight doesn't end. Sometimes surviving is just the beginning of a much longer battle. I'm still here. I don't know what the future looks like, and I don't feel brave most days, but I'm alive. And even though I'm scared, grieving, and broken in ways I don't fully understand yet, I'm still trying. That's all I can do for now. We were in Seattle for a game and decided to rent an Airbnb for the night instead of driving back late. This was back when Airbnb was still fairly affordable and didn't feel like such a gamble. We found a small, older house in the Ballard area that was cheap, available, and close enough to where we needed to be. It wasn't fancy, but for one night, it seemed fine. We arrived in the afternoon, hours before the game, planning to drop off our bags, have a couple of beers, and then head out. Right away, the place felt off. Nothing was outright horrifying at first, just uncomfortable in a way that's hard to explain. The house looked neglected, like it hadn't been properly cared for in a long time. The furniture felt random and out of place, as if someone had moved things around without any real reason and then just left them that way. Everything was dated, worn down, and in varying states of disrepair. Cabinets didn't quite close right, walls were scuffed and stained, and the whole place felt tired. Outside, under the porch, there was a hole torn open in the wall. It wasn't subtle either. It looked like someone had ripped it open intentionally. When we looked closer, it was obvious someone had been crawling under there. There were flattened areas, disturbed dirt, and signs that someone may have been sleeping there at some point. That definitely gave us pause, but we brushed it off. It was a cheap place in an older neighborhood, and we told ourselves we were overthinking it. We didn't spend much time there. We grabbed our things, had a beer or two, and left to get food, and then go to the game. By the time we came back, it was fully dark outside. The moment we walked back into the house, something felt wrong. Not in a dramatic jump scare way, but in a quiet, unsettling way that made your stomach tighten. When we stepped into the kitchen, it genuinely looked like years had passed since we'd been there earlier that same afternoon. That sounds ridiculous, but that's the only way I can describe it. There was dust everywhere. Not a light layer, but thick, settled dust. The most disturbing part was a pendant light that hung over a small dining table in a little nook at the back of the kitchen. Earlier that day, we had stood right there. The refrigerator was next to the table, and I clearly remembered looking at that light. It had not been dusty. Now the top of the pendant light was coated in a heavy layer of dust, and drawn into that dust, clearly and deliberately, were the words, "Help me." Someone had written it with their finger. We just stood there staring at it. There was no logical explanation. No one else had been in the house. We had locked up when we left. The dust hadn't been there before, and the message wasn't subtle or accidental. It was unmistakable. That's when the mood shifted completely. Up until that point, the house had been weird and uncomfortable. Now it felt threatening. We started second-guessing every sound. When we heard footsteps or other noises, we tried to convince ourselves it was just the house settling, or that we were spooked and imagining things. Eventually, I went to my room and tried to sleep. I told myself that we were tired, overstimulated, and letting our imaginations run wild. I fell asleep, but it didn't last long. My brother came into my room not long after and woke me up. He looked shaken in a way I'd never seen before. He asked me if I had gotten up, if I had gone into the bathroom, if I had taken a shower. I told him no. He said he heard the shower curtain slam open and then shut, not gently, but forcefully. He said he saw shadows moving in the hallway and heard footsteps running back and forth in and out of the hall multiple times. He was sure someone else was in the house. At that point, there was no pretending anymore. We got up together and started checking the house. Doors were still locked. Nothing looked disturbed, but the feeling in the air was heavy and oppressive, like the house itself was watching us. That's when we decided to open the basement door. The moment we cracked it open, the atmosphere changed instantly. The creepy feeling jumped from uncomfortable to overwhelming. It felt like the air itself was humming with something dark and wrong. It's hard to explain without sounding dramatic, but it felt like stepping into a place where something terrible had happened and never really left. We went down the stairs slowly and reluctantly. The smell hit us first. It was unmistakable. Rotten meat and bleach. If you've ever had a freezer full of food go bad while you're away, you know the smell. That sickly, sweet rot that clings to everything and never fully goes away, no matter how much you clean. It was exactly like that. The basement itself was unfinished and dim. It looked like it hadn't been used in a long time, but the smells suggested otherwise. Toward the back, there was a door that led outside. It opened to a small set of steps, going up to a covered carport hidden off an alley. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Right inside that exterior door was another door. This one led to a small, empty, square concrete room. It looked like an old canning cellar or storage room. No windows, bare concrete walls, no light inside. What made my blood run cold was the door itself. There was a deadbolt on the outside. On the inside, there was no handle at all. That meant if someone was locked inside that room, they had no way to get out on their own. We didn't stay down there long. We didn't need to. Everything about that space screamed that it was not a place meant for anything good. We went back upstairs, locked ourselves in our rooms, and barely slept the rest of the night. We left as soon as it was light out. The feeling that place gave me didn't disappear when we did. It lingered for weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about the dust, the message, the sounds, the basement, that door. I still don't know if someone had been in that house with us, if someone had been there before us and left signs behind, or if something else entirely was going on. All I know is that it didn't feel like a haunted house in the movie sense. It felt worse. It felt like a place where real human suffering had happened, and the echoes of it were still there, pressing in on anyone who stepped inside. Even now, years later, I can still smell that basement if I think about it too long. And I don't think I'll ever forget the feeling of standing in that kitchen, staring at those words in the dust, knowing with complete certainty that something was very, very wrong. Pardon the interruption for just a moment. I hope these stories are keeping you on the edge of your seat tonight. If you're finding yourself drawn to these dark accounts, I'd love to have you join us. If you're new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button. We share new true horror stories every single day, and being part of the community is the only way to make sure you never miss a nightmare. A quick like and a comment also means a lot. It really helps the shadows spread a little further. But for now, let's get back to it. The darkness is calling. My mom took a picture of the new couch we had just bought. It was nothing special, just a normal photo taken on her phone to show it off. She sent it to my aunt like people do all the time, just to say, "Look, this is the new couch." Nothing more than that. When my mom first looked at the picture, she didn't notice anything strange. None of us did. It looked completely normal. A couch in the living room, a clock on the wall, the usual things you would expect to see in a family home. My aunt, however, is the type of person who really looks at pictures closely. She zooms in, looks around the edges, notices details most people would miss. A little while after my mom sent the photo, my aunt replied back, but not with the reaction you'd expect. She didn't say the couch looked nice. Instead, she asked a strange question. She asked my mom if there was supposed to be a face in the clock. At first, my mom thought she was joking. She laughed it off and said no, of course not. But my aunt insisted and told her to look again, really look, especially at the clock. So my mom opened the photo again and zoomed in. That's when she saw it. Inside the clock, in the reflection or the shadows or whatever it was, there was something that looked like a man's face. Not a clear, sharp face, but clear enough that once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The head looked kind of square, not perfectly round like a normal face. The features were there in a way that made your stomach drop. Eyes, a nose, a mouth. It wasn't just random shapes anymore once it clicked. It looked intentional, like a face staring back. The closest way I can describe it is that it looked like Roy Kent, but a more disturbing version. The same general shape, that strong square head, but darker, heavier, and unsettling. There was something about the expression that felt wrong. It didn't look friendly or neutral. It looked like it was watching. When my mom showed the rest of us, the mood in the room changed instantly. That light, normal feeling disappeared. Our hearts dropped in that quiet, sinking way, where no one wants to say what they're thinking, but everyone is thinking the same thing. We all stared at the photo, zooming in and out, hoping maybe it would turn back into nothing. But it didn't. The face stayed there. What made it worse was that none of us had noticed it at first. The picture had been taken casually, in broad daylight, in our own home. There was no reason to expect anything strange. That made it feel more invasive. Like something had slipped into the photo without anyone realizing. After that, we couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time we went into that living room, someone would glance at the clock. Not because anything else happened right away, but because the idea was planted in our heads. Once you start wondering if something is there, it's hard to feel fully comfortable again. The strange thing is that after that incident, nothing truly dramatic happened. No loud noises, no shadows moving across the walls, no voices, no objects flying across the room. Life mostly went on as normal. We still went back to that house regularly, even 1 or 2 years after the photo was taken. And for the most part, everything felt ordinary. There was only one other thing that happened, and even that was subtle, but unsettling in its own way. One day, we all left the house to go on a day trip. Nothing unusual about that. We locked up like we always did and left for the day. When we came back later, the front door was open. Not wide open, but clearly unlocked and ajar. That immediately set off alarm bells. Your mind jumps to the worst possibilities right away. Someone broke in, someone was inside, something was stolen. We went inside carefully, hearts pounding, checking each room. But nothing was missing, not a single thing. There were expensive items left right there on the table, directly in front of the door. Electronics, valuables, things that would be the first to go if someone had broken in with bad intentions. There were no signs of a struggle, no drawers pulled out, no mess, just an open door. That somehow made it feel creepier than if something had been stolen. At least theft would have been an explanation. This felt like someone had been there for another reason, or maybe no one had been there at all, and the door opening had no clear cause. We tried to explain it logically. Maybe someone forgot to lock it properly. Maybe the wind pushed it open somehow. but deep down, it didn't fully sit right, especially with that photo still in our minds. Even now, when we talk about it, we all agree on one thing. The house never felt aggressively scary. It wasn't like we were constantly afraid or felt like we were in danger. It was more like a quiet unease, something sitting in the background, the kind of thing that doesn't scream at you but whispers just enough to make you uncomfortable. The face in the clock is still the part that sticks with me the most. Because it wasn't something that happened in the moment, like a noise or a movement that could be blamed on fear or imagination. It was captured, frozen in a photo, something that multiple people saw independently and agreed on. Maybe it was just pareidolia, the brain finding faces where there are none. That's what people always say, and maybe that's true. But the timing, the clarity once it was pointed out, and the feeling it gave us all, makes it hard to fully dismiss. We still go there. We still sit on that couch. The clock is still on the wall. Life didn't stop because of it. But every now and then, someone will bring it up and the room gets quiet for a moment. Because even if nothing else ever happens, that one image was enough to leave a mark. It's the kind of thing that doesn't ruin your life or keep you up every night. But it stays with you. A small crack in your sense of normal. A reminder that sometimes strange things don't come with big explanations. And sometimes the scariest moments are the quiet ones that never fully make sense. My mother told me this story when I was a kid, and no matter how many years pass, it has never left me. Even now, as an adult, I still bring it up to her from time to time, partly because it still unsettles me, and partly because it feels like one of those moments in life that changes you forever. My mom remembers every detail, as if it happened yesterday, even though more than 50 years have gone by. Both my mom and I are very strong Christians. Faith has always been a central part of our lives, not something casual or half-hearted, but something deeply rooted in how we understand the world. Because of that, this story never felt like something she told for shock value or drama. It was never exaggerated, never dressed up to sound scarier. She told it plainly, quietly, and only when the moment felt right. That somehow made it even more powerful. When my mom was a child, her own mother, my grandmother, passed away. It wasn't a long illness that gave everyone time to prepare. It was sudden enough that the grief hit hard and fast. The house felt empty in a way that went beyond physical absence. My mom described it as if the air itself had changed, like the warmth had been drained out of everything. Her father, my grandfather, was completely broken by the loss. He tried to stay strong for his daughter, but the pain was written all over him. In the days immediately after the death, nothing felt normal. Routine disappeared. Sleep came in fragments. Meals were barely touched. The house, once filled with my grandmother's presence, felt too quiet. Because of the grief and fear of being alone, my mom slept in the same bed as her dad that night. She was still young, scared, and overwhelmed by the sudden reality that her mother was gone. That night started like any other night, filled with exhaustion and sorrow. The room was dark, the kind of dark that feels heavier when you're grieving. My mom eventually drifted into sleep, but it wasn't deep or peaceful. It was restless, the kind of sleep where you're half aware of everything around you. Sometime in the middle of the night, she woke up. At first, she didn't know why. There was no loud noise, no sudden movement, just a feeling that something had changed. Then she heard it. Sounds coming from the hallway outside the bedroom. Not random sounds, not creaks or settling noises from the house. It sounded exactly like her mother's slippers dragging softly across the floor. My mom said she knew that sound better than almost anything. Her mother had a very specific way of walking at night, slow and careful, her slippers brushing the floor with each step. It was such a familiar sound that for a brief moment her mind tried to convince her that everything was normal, that her mom was still alive, still walking down the hallway like she always did. But reality hit immediately after that thought. Her mother was gone. The sound continued, slow and deliberate, moving closer to the bedroom door. My mom's heart started pounding. She lay there frozen, listening, too scared to move, too scared to speak. Then she heard the bedroom door open slightly, just a little, enough to let in a darker shape against the darkness of the room. The room itself was pitch black. There was no moonlight, no lamp, nothing to help her see clearly. But then she felt it, a presence above her. A not touching her, not speaking, just there, heavy, overwhelming, watching. She said fear washed over her so completely that she couldn't even scream. Her body went rigid. Every instinct told her something was wrong, something she didn't understand and couldn't control. Slowly, she looked up. What she saw stayed with her for the rest of her life. She didn't see a solid person. There were no clear facial features, no clothing, no details like you'd expect from a physical body. What she saw was a shape, a human-shaped form standing over her, and inside that shape were what looked like stars, not bright like fireworks, but deep and endless like a night sky. It wasn't glowing in a way that lit the room, but it was unmistakably there. She knew instantly who it was. It was her mother. Not because the figure spoke, and not because it smiled or reached out. She just knew. In the same way you recognize someone you love without needing proof. The knowledge came from somewhere deeper than logic, but knowing it was her mother didn't take the fear away. If anything, it made it worse. My mom started shaking her dad, who was lying next to her. She whispered urgently, her voice trembling, saying over and over, "Dad, wake up! Dad, wake up!" She was desperate for him to see it too, to confirm she wasn't imagining it, to protect her from whatever was happening. Her father was awake. That was the part that unsettled her the most. He didn't sit up. He didn't turn on a light. He didn't react with shock or confusion. Calmly, almost gently, he said, "Go back to sleep, just ignore it and go back to sleep." Those words didn't comfort her. They terrified her. Well, why wasn't he reacting? Why wasn't he afraid? The presence didn't move. It didn't speak. It just remained there, silently watching. My mom said she felt completely helpless. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She prayed. She prayed over and over again, out loud, in her head. She begged God to make it go away. She asked for protection. She asked for peace. She asked for it to stop. She didn't know how long she prayed. Time felt strange, stretched, and unreal. Eventually, without warning, the presence faded. The shape dissolved into the darkness, like it had never been there at all. Exhausted and emotionally drained, my mom eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, the house felt different again, still heavy with grief, but quieter. My mom found her dad sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring into nothing. He looked older than he had the day before, like the night had taken something from him. She hesitated, then asked him about what happened. He didn't act confused. He didn't ask what she meant. All he said was, "I know, I saw her too." That was it. No long explanation, no discussion, just confirmation. In that moment, my mom understood something that would stay with her forever. Her mother had come to say goodbye, not to scare her, not to harm her, but to visit one last time. Even so, it was terrifying, not because it was evil, but because it crossed a boundary between life and death that no child is ready to face. My mom still believes with complete certainty that it was her mother, not a demon, not a trick of the mind, not a dream, a final visit, a farewell. Even now, decades later, she can describe the sound of the slippers, the way the door opened, the feeling of the presence and the star-filled shape without hesitation. Her voice changes when she talks about it, softer, more serious, like she's standing in that dark room again. As a Christian, she doesn't see it as something that contradicts her faith. She sees it as something mysterious, something allowed by God for reasons we may never fully understand. But that doesn't make it less frightening. Sacred moments can still be terrifying when they're unexpected. When she tells the story, she always says the same thing. She knows her mother came in love. But love doesn't always feel gentle when it comes wrapped in the unknown. That story shaped how my mom understands death, grief, and the unseen world. And hearing it shaped me too. It reminds me that even faith doesn't erase fear, and that some experiences stay with us not because they were bad, but because they were powerful. 50 years later, the memory is still clear, still sharp, still real, and every time she tells it, I can see that little girl in the dark, shaking her father, praying for it to stop, and realizing for the first time that death doesn't always mean goodbye. For the record, I don't believe in the afterlife. I never really have. I'm not someone who jumps to ghosts or spirits or anything supernatural when something strange happens. I've always tried to look for logical explanations first, even when things don't make sense right away. That's probably why this story has stayed with me for so long. No matter how many ways I turn it over in my head, I still don't have an explanation that feels solid. I don't think it was anything paranormal, but I also don't know what it was. And that uncertainty is what makes it unsettling even now. I grew up in a really old house. I don't know the exact year it was built, but it was one of those places that felt old the moment you walked inside. The floors creaked no matter how carefully you stepped. The walls weren't straight. The door frames were slightly warped, and every sound echoed more than it should have. It wasn't the kind of old house that felt charming or cozy. It felt heavy, like it had seen too much life pass through it, and had never quite settled afterward. When you live somewhere like that as a kid, you don't really question it at first. It's just your house. You grow up learning which steps to avoid so the floor doesn't groan too loudly at night, which doors stick when it's humid, and which parts of the house feel colder no matter how high the heat is turned up. It becomes normal, at least you tell yourself it does. One incident happened when I was still pretty young. I don't remember my exact age, but I know I was a kid. Old enough to shower by myself, young enough to still feel completely helpless when something went wrong. I was in the bathroom taking a shower, the water running, steam filling the small space. The sound of the water was loud, drowning out everything else like it always does. Out of nowhere, I heard a man's voice scream directly into my ear, not from across the room, not muffled through the walls. It felt like someone was standing right behind me, leaning in close. The words were clear, sharp, and violent. "I will kill you." There was no pause, no follow-up. Just that sentence shouted with so much force that my entire body locked up for a split second before panic took over. I don't remember turning the water off. I don't remember grabbing a towel. All I remember is running. I ran out of the shower, out of the bathroom, completely naked, soaked, slipping on the floor, screaming and crying as I bolted through the house toward my mother. I was hysterical. I couldn't even get the words out at first. I just knew something had happened that felt very real and very wrong. My mother came running, alarmed by my reaction. She asked me what was wrong, what happened, who was there. I told her between sobs that someone had screamed at me, that a man had threatened to kill me. She checked the bathroom, she checked the hallway, she checked the rest of the house. No one was there. She told me she hadn't heard anything, not a shout, not a voice, nothing at all. At the time, she tried to calm me down, telling me it must have been my imagination or maybe the sound of the pipes or water echoing strangely. Old houses make weird noises, I knew that. She knew that. But what I heard didn't sound like pipes or echoes. It sounded like a person, a real person. A voice with intention behind it. Still, I was a kid. Eventually, I accepted her explanation because I didn't have another choice. What else could I do? I didn't want to believe someone had actually been there. The idea that someone could have been close enough to scream into my ear without anyone else noticing was terrifying. But that wasn't the only thing that happened in that house. Over time, the police started showing up. The first time it happened, it was the middle of the night. Loud banging on the front door jolted us awake. My heart was pounding before I even knew what was happening. My mother answered the door to find police officers standing there, serious and alert. They asked if everything was okay. They said they had received a call from our address. According to them, yes, someone had called 911 and said they were going to kill everyone in the house, then hung up. My mother was confused and scared. She told them no one in the house had made that call. They checked around, asked questions, and eventually left. But the feeling they left behind lingered. It wasn't just fear, it was confusion. Why would someone call from our house and say something like that? It didn't stop after that. The police came back more than once, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes during the day. Each time it was the same story. A call had come in from our address. Someone had threatened to kill everyone in the house. Then the line went dead. Each time we told them the same thing. No one in the house had made those calls. There was no explanation, no obvious suspect, no clear source. What made it even stranger was that our house wasn't just occupied by our family. We rented out the basement to other people. Over the years, different tenants lived down there. You would think, logically, that it might have been one of them. That was the easiest explanation, but the thing is, they were actually nice people, normal, friendly. They didn't give off any strange vibes. There were no arguments, no signs of instability, nothing that suggested they were making violent prank calls. The police spoke to them too. As far as I know, nothing ever came of it. There were no arrests, no charges, no explanation. Living in that house started to feel tense. Even when nothing was happening, there was always the possibility that something might. Every unexpected sound made my stomach drop. Every phone call made us wonder if the police would be showing up again. As a kid, that kind of constant low-level fear sinks into you. You don't know how to articulate it, but it shapes the way you move through your own home. What bothered me the most was how disconnected everything felt. The voice in the shower, the threatening phone calls, the police showing up at random hours. None of it fit together neatly, but it also didn't feel like a series of unrelated coincidences. It felt like pieces of something bigger that never fully revealed itself. Years later, looking back, I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone spoofed the phone line. Maybe there was an issue with the wiring in the house that somehow caused calls to register incorrectly. Maybe the voice I heard was some strange auditory hallucination brought on by stress, noise, or a developing imagination. But none of those explanations sit comfortably. Auditory hallucinations don't usually produce such clear, specific threats. Phone line issues don't usually result in repeated calls with the same violent message. And even if there were logical explanations for each event individually, the way they overlapped in time and space makes it hard to dismiss them completely. One detail that still makes me shake my head is the address. The house was located at 17 Elm Street. I know numbers and street names don't mean anything on their own. I know it's easy to read into things after the fact, but something about that address feels like a cruel joke in hindsight. An old house, threatening voices, police calls, a sense of being watched or targeted, and then that address, like something out of a bad horror movie. Even now, I don't think it was anything supernatural. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits or the afterlife. I don't think someone was haunting us, but I do believe something was wrong in that house. Whether it was a person we never identified, a series of coincidences amplified by fear or some bizarre combination of technical issues and bad luck. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that it left a mark. To this day, sudden loud noises still make my heart race. Unexpected knocks on the door make me uneasy. Being alone in an unfamiliar house at night puts me on edge in a way I can't fully explain. It's not panic, exactly. It's a deep instinctive awareness that things aren't always what they seem, and that danger doesn't always announce itself in obvious ways. That house taught me that you don't need to believe in the afterlife for something to haunt you. Sometimes the unanswered questions are enough. Eight years ago, my family had a cat named Hazel. She was a black cat, small and quiet, the kind of pet that slowly becomes part of the background of your life in a way you don't fully notice until they're gone. She had her habits, her favorite spots, her routines that blended into our daily lives. One strange detail that always stuck with us was the timing of her death. Hazel died on Martin Luther King Day. At the time, it felt like a sad coincidence, nothing more. We mourned her, buried her, and slowly tried to move on, telling ourselves that pets come and go and that life simply continues. For the first few weeks after Hazel died, everything felt normal. The house was quieter, yes, but nothing felt wrong. We missed her, especially the way she would appear out of nowhere and curl up somewhere unexpected. About a month later, that sense of normal started to shift in small, subtle ways that were easy to brush off at first. It began with quick movements, black shapes barely visible, darting through rooms. At first, it was always in the corner of your eye. You'd be sitting on the couch or walking down the hallway and think you saw something move. Just a shadow, just your imagination. We all assumed that's what it was. After all, our brains are used to seeing certain things, especially after a loss. It made sense that we might still expect Hazel to be there. But it didn't stop. In fact, it became more frequent. There were moments when one of us would pause mid-step, convinced something had just run past. Someone would say, "Did you see that?" And someone else would answer, "Probably nothing." We didn't talk about it much at first. Almost as if saying it out loud would make it real. We told ourselves it was stress, grief, tricks of the light, or simple habit. Then one night, it became harder to explain away. I was walking into our family room, not thinking about anything in particular, when I felt something brush past my leg. It wasn't just a shadow this time. It felt real. Instinctively, I stopped and looked down, my heart jumping for just a second. I was sure I had seen a small black figure run right past me, exactly the way Hazel used to when she was in a hurry. I stood there, confused, replaying the moment in my head. I knew Hazel was gone. I knew there couldn't be anything there. Still, the feeling lingered. I turned toward my mom, unsure of what to say. Before I could even explain what I thought I saw, she spoke first. "Oh," she said casually, almost gently. "You just saw Hazel too." The way she said it was what scared me the most. There was no shock in her voice, no surprise. It was as if she had already accepted it, as if this was something that had been happening and she just hadn't talked about it yet. That was the moment when we realized this wasn't just one person imagining things. After that, we started comparing experiences, quietly at first, then more openly. My mom admitted she had been seeing the same black shapes out of the corner of her eye for weeks. My siblings had noticed it too, always quick, always silent, always gone before you could focus on it directly. The strangest part was how familiar it felt. It didn't feel threatening. It didn't feel like something unknown. It felt like Hazel. The way the shape moved, the size, the speed, the places it appeared. It was exactly how she used to behave when she was alive. Months passed and the sightings continued. Sometimes they happened several times a week, sometimes only once in a while. There was no pattern we could identify. They didn't happen at night more than during the day. They didn't seem tied to emotion or stress. They just happened. Then October came. My older sister was turning 16, and my parents decided to throw her a proper sweet 16 party. The house was full of people, music, laughter, and noise. Friends of hers came over, some of whom had never been inside our home before. The energy was completely different from the quiet, uneasy moments we had been experiencing. At one point during the party, a group of kids was gathered in the living room, talking and joking around. One of them, a kid who had never been to our house before, suddenly said something that made the room go quiet for just a moment. "I didn't know you guys had a cat," he said. We all looked at him, confused. Someone laughed and said, "We don't." He shook his head, completely serious. "Yeah, you do. I just saw it." Naturally, we asked him where. He pointed toward the piano bench. That spot sent a chill through all of us. Hazel had always sat on the piano bench, always. It was one of her favorite places in the house. She would jump up there and curl into a tight ball, watching everything from a comfortable distance. It was so specific, so exact, that none of us could dismiss it as coincidence. We asked the kid what the cat looked like. He said it was black. That's when we told him the truth, that we had a black cat named Hazel. That she had died months earlier. That no one else had seen a living cat in the house since. The look on his face changed instantly. He laughed at first, assuming we were joking, but when he realized we weren't, his smile faded. He insisted he had seen a cat sitting there, clear as day. He hadn't been scared. He hadn't thought it was strange at all. He had just assumed it was our pet. After that night, the mood in the house changed. What had once felt familiar now felt unsettling. The idea that someone outside our family had seen the same thing made it harder to ignore. This wasn't shared imagination. This wasn't grief playing tricks on us. Someone with no emotional connection to Hazel had seen her in the exact place she used to sit. Still, life went on. School, work, routines. The black figures continued to appear from time to time. We didn't talk about them as much anymore, not because they stopped, but because none of us knew what to say. Then something unexpected happened. We got a new car. Her name was Sheba. It sounds small, almost silly compared to everything else, but after Sheba came into our lives, the sightings stopped. Completely. No more black shapes running past. No more movement in the corner of our eyes. No more moments of stopping mid-step because something brushed past. The house felt normal again. Quiet, but not heavy. Empty in the way a house without a pet usually feels. Not in the strange, watchful way it had before. We didn't notice it right away. Days passed, then weeks. Eventually, someone pointed it out. "Have you noticed we haven't seen Hazel in a while?" When we thought back, we realized it was true. The last sightings had happened shortly before Sheba arrived. After that, nothing. We never found an explanation that fully made sense. Some of us wondered if Hazel had been lingering, not wanting to leave until something else took her place. Some thought it was all coincidence layered on coincidence. Others believed it was grief manifesting in strange ways that somehow aligned across multiple people. Even now, years later, we still talk about it sometimes. Not in a dramatic way, not like a ghost story meant to scare, more like something we still don't understand, something that sits quietly in the back of our minds. What stays with me the most isn't fear, it's familiarity, the way the presence felt known, the way it moved exactly like Hazel used to, the way someone who had never met her saw her without any prompting. I don't know what it was. All I know is that for a while after Hazel died, our house didn't feel empty. And then, one day, it finally did. thank you for spending your night with me. I hope these lullabies stay with you, but not too close. If you found these stories chilling, please like the video and subscribe to join the family. Every comment and sub helps us keep the darkness growing. Get as comfortable as you can, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Sweet dreams.